Cain and Claire Wilkens looked like the embodiment of suburban success, the kind of couple people pointed to when imagining the perfect family life. Their home sat at the end of a tree-lined street with a freshly painted fence, a tidy garden, and bicycles resting neatly against the garage. Every morning, Cain left for work in a press suit, briefcase in hand, while Claire waved goodbye from the porch with their children at her side. To neighbors, the Wilkens household was calm, structured, and enviable. They were admired at church gatherings, praised at school events, and trusted enough to host neighborhood barbecues. The appearance of happiness was flawless, and no one thought to look beneath the surface. Cain thrived in his professional life as a financial advisor, where charm and confidence helped him win clients easily. He was seen as reliable, someone who had life figured out, but beneath the smile he showed in public was a man growing tired of predictability. He felt trapped in the steady rhythms of marriage and domestic life, craving something that stirred adrenaline instead of responsibility. He began to see Claire not as his partner, but as part of the cage he imagined himself locked inside. These thoughts ate away at him, even while he continued to present himself as the picture of a devoted husband. Claire, on the other hand, found fulfillment in the quieter aspects of life. She poured her energy into raising their children, volunteering at a local food bank, and building connections with families in the community. Her kindness was often the first thing people noticed about her. She remembered birthdays, brought meals to sick neighbors, and never hesitated to offer help. While Cain longed for excitement, Claire believed happiness came from consistency in care. She had no idea that the very qualities she thought held their family together were the same ones Cain was beginning to resent. The seeds of Cain's discontent grew slowly but steadily. At first, it was small things. Scrolling through dating apps when he thought no one was watching, exchanging messages with strangers under fake names, and imagining scenarios where he could be with someone else. What began as harmless curiosity turned into an obsession. He convinced himself that he was entitled to more, that after years of living the perfect life, he deserved a thrill that Claire could never give him. He wanted passion, novelty, and danger, the kind of life he thought belonged in movies, not in his quiet cul-de-sac. By the time Cain's 35th birthday approached, his restlessness had hardened into a plan. He began fantasizing about what it would mean to celebrate with someone new on his arm, a woman who reflected the youth and excitement he thought he had lost. Instead of dreading the milestone, he started treating it like a deadline, a turning point where he would finally take what he believed was his. While Claire baked cakes for their children and planned family dinners, Cain was scheming about how to trade one life for another. The story of Cain and Claire Wilkens was about to turn from a picture-perfect dream into a nightmare no one in their neighborhood could have predicted. Cain's birthday loomed closer, and with it came the pressure he had placed on himself to turn his fantasies into reality. For months, he had carried around the gnawing thought that life with Claire had become stale, predictable, and suffocating. He told himself he deserved something different. Something thrilling, something that would prove he hadn't wasted his youth living a routine suburban script. When he met Lila in a downtown bar, that thought shifted from daydream to possibility. She was younger, carefree, and uninvolved in the obligations that Cain felt chained to. Lila liked the way Cain carried himself, the confidence of a man who seemed to know what he wanted, though she never asked too many questions about his life. For Cain, she was not just a distraction, she was the symbol of the life he craved. Their meetings were secretive but exhilarating. Cain began spending more money than usual, renting hotel rooms under aliases and buying gifts for Lila. He spun lies to cover his absences, telling Claire he had late-night meetings with clients or urgent business trips. Claire noticed, of course. She was not blind to the sudden change in his schedule, nor to the unexplained credit card charges. Still, she said nothing, instead channeling her unease into quiet observation. It was during these weeks that she began writing in her journal, recording her fears in detail. Her notes revealed a woman who loved her husband but no longer trusted him, a woman who sensed danger building beneath the surface of her marriage. Cain, meanwhile, was consumed by planning. He wanted his birthday to be a declaration, a line drawn between his old life and the new one he imagined for himself. He began transferring small amounts of money into hidden accounts, careful to keep the totals just under the threshold that would draw attention. He browsed real estate listings far from his current neighborhood, imagining a home where he and Lila could start fresh. More disturbingly, he researched ways people had vanished without leaving evidence behind. He read about cases where spouses disappeared, stories that ended in life insurance payouts and new beginnings. These searches were never meant to be found, yet Cain conducted them with chilling precision as though he were studying for an exam. Despite his secretive planning, Cain continued to present himself to the outside world as the same responsible husband and father. He attended community events, helped his children with homework, and smiled at neighbors on his evening jogs. No one could have guessed what was unfolding behind closed doors. Claire, however, grew more anxious with each passing day. She discovered receipts for a hotel she had never heard Cain mention, noticed his distant behavior at dinner, and felt the weight of unspoken truths pressing in around her. The closer they drew to his birthday, the more certain she became that something irreversible was about to happen. Cain convinced himself he was justified, that this was not betrayal but liberation. He told himself he had worked hard, provided well, and now deserved a reward. What he failed to see was how dangerous his desires had become, how the fantasy of having another woman for his birthday had twisted into something far darker. The stage was set, and while Cain believed he was in control, the cracks in his carefully crafted plan were already beginning to show. The night of Cain's birthday arrived with an unsettling stillness. The Wilkens house, usually quiet after dinner, pulsed with music that carried down the block. Neighbors assumed it was a celebration, though no one had been invited over, which struck some as unusual for the normally sociable couple. Lights flickered through the curtains, shadows moved across the living room, and the faint hum of laughter was heard, though no one could tell how many people were actually inside. Sometime around midnight, the music stopped abruptly, leaving the street in silence. That silence lingered into the morning, but it was broken by whispers that would soon grow into suspicions. By dawn, Claire was gone. Her car sat in the driveway, her purse on the kitchen counter, and her phone still plugged in beside the bed. To Cain, this was a problem to solve with performance. When he called the police, his voice carried just the right tremor of panic, the tone of a husband blindsided by his wife's sudden departure. He told officers they had argued late into the night, and Claire had stormed out in anger. He suggested she might have gone to clear her head, perhaps to a friend's house, though he admitted he didn't know where. The scene, however, didn't fit the story. Few people leave home in the middle of the night without keys, wallet, or a phone. Investigators began to take note of the inconsistencies almost immediately. Cain claimed he had gone to bed shortly after the argument, but footage from a nearby security camera told a different story. Around 1 a.m., Cain's car was seen pulling out of the driveway, the trunk slightly ajar as though it carried something large. The grainy footage caught the outline of a bulky suitcase being loaded into the vehicle, its weight evident from Cain's strained movements. Hours later, the car returned, the trunk now empty. No suitcase was ever found. Neighbors who once admired the Wilkens began whispering. Some admitted they had seen the couple's relationship strain in recent months, with Claire looking distracted and Cain increasingly aloof. Others mentioned hearing noises the night of her disappearance. Music turned up too loud, followed by the sharp thud of something heavy falling. No one reported it at the time, but in hindsight, the details grew sinister. Cain maintained his role as the grieving husband, telling anyone who would listen that Claire had simply abandoned him and the children. He leaned on the image of the hard-working family man, hoping it would shield him from suspicion. But detectives noticed something else. Cain showed little interest in finding his wife. He participated in interviews, but his answers were rehearsed, almost mechanical, as if he were following a script. Forensic teams combed through the Wilkens home, gathering items for analysis. The bed where Cain claimed to have slept appeared untouched, and faint traces of blood were found near the garage, though not enough to suggest a violent struggle had occurred there. Dogs trained to detect human remains were brought to the property. When they circled Cain's car, they alerted in the area of the trunk. Later tests would reveal traces of blood too degraded to be immediately identified. but enough to raise suspicions higher. The disappearance of Claire Wilkens turned from a missing persons case into a suspected crime. The public, once charmed by the family, began to view Cain differently. His calm demeanor seemed out of place, his rehearsed statements unsettling. What had begun as whispers among neighbors now spread to news outlets, drawing attention from beyond their quiet suburb. Cain had wanted his birthday to mark a new beginning, but instead it had become the night his carefully constructed facade began to crumble. The investigation into Claire's disappearance shifted quickly once detectives began following the threads Cain had left behind. At first glance, he seemed to have rehearsed his story well, but the closer they looked, the more the inconsistencies piled up. Financial records revealed a troubling picture. Hotel receipts under his name, expensive dinners charged late at night, and purchases that had nothing to do with family life. Detectives tracked these details and soon uncovered the name of a woman linked to him, Lila. She had no idea her casual involvement with Cain was now the center of a criminal investigation. To her, their relationship had been secretive but exciting, the kind of romance with no strings attached. But to detectives, she became a critical piece in the puzzle of what happened to Claire. When officers interviewed Lila, her account painted Cain as a man living a double life. On the night of Claire's disappearance, Cain had arranged to meet her at a hotel across town. He arrived late, flustered but insistent that they celebrate his birthday together. She recalled him smelling faintly of gasoline and sweat, though she hadn't thought much of it at the time. To investigators, this was damning. The timeline placed him away from home during the exact hours he claimed Claire had walked out. It suggested not only deceit, but also a deliberate attempt to construct an alibi. Back at the Wilkens house, the search turned up even more unsettling discoveries. Claire's journal, tucked away in her bedside table, revealed her growing unease in the weeks leading up to the disappearance. She had noted Cain's strange absences, his cold demeanor, and her suspicions about another woman. Her words were haunting. An anxious record of a woman who feared her marriage had become dangerous. She never accused him outright, but her writing painted a picture of dread, a sense she was being watched, and the chilling thought that she might not live to see the end of Cain's birthday. Investigators dug deeper into Cain's digital footprint. His computer held late-night searches that were impossible to explain away. Among them were instructions on how to dissolve remains in chemicals, ways to move a body without leaving evidence, and details about life insurance payouts. One search even specified how long it took for blood to degrade in the trunk of a car. These were not the queries of a man worried about his missing wife. They were the tracks of someone preparing for a crime. The strongest lead came when cadaver dogs were brought to Cain's vehicle. The animals reacted immediately at the trunk, their signals unmistakable. Forensic testing followed, revealing faint traces of blood embedded in the fibers of the carpeting. At first, Cain denied knowing how it could have gotten there, suggesting it must have been from groceries or a hunting trip years ago. But when the samples were tested, they matched Claire's DNA. Suddenly, the case shifted from suspicion to near certainty. As the evidence mounted, Cain's calm performance began to crack. His once confident posture now seemed strained, his carefully rehearsed words delivered with hesitation. He continued to insist that Claire had left on her own, but detectives knew the story no longer fit. The trail he thought he had hidden, secret accounts, suspicious receipts, late-night movements, had instead become a roadmap leading directly to him. The man who wanted another woman for his birthday had left behind enough clues to expose his darkest secret. The case against Cain Wilkens seemed nearly complete, yet investigators knew they needed undeniable proof to secure a conviction. Rumors swirled through the community, feeding media coverage that painted Cain as a cold and calculating husband. Still, without a body, the defense could argue that Claire had chosen to disappear, leaving her family behind. Detectives pressed harder, combing through every lead until a discovery miles from the Wilkens home changed everything. An abandoned cabin tucked deep into a wooded area rarely visited caught their attention after a tip from a hiker who had noticed strange odors and scorched ground nearby. When investigators arrived, what they found was grim. The cabin itself was derelict, windows shattered, the interior filled with dust and decay. Behind it, however, was a makeshift fire pit, charred black from repeated use. Sifting through the ashes, forensic teams uncovered small fragments of bone. At first, they were uncertain whether the remains were animal or human, but further examination revealed the devastating truth. The fragments belonged to Claire. Among the debris, a half-melted necklace glistened in the soot, engraved with her initials. It was the final piece of evidence that tied Cain directly to her disappearance and death. The suitcase seen on camera leaving the house was never found, but the burned remains confirmed what investigators had suspected all along. Cain had tried to erase Claire from existence. When confronted with the evidence, Cain remained unshaken. He denied involvement, insisting that someone else must have been responsible. He argued that the necklace could have been planted, that the bone fragments might not be Claire's. His refusal to accept reality only deepened the impression of his guilt. Prosecutors moved quickly, presenting a case that combined the journal entries, digital searches, financial secrets, DNA evidence, and now the remains at the cabin. To strengthen their argument, they brought Lila to the stand. Terrified of being implicated, she admitted Cain had spoken of giving himself the best birthday gift by making sure Claire would never return. Her testimony revealed Cain's chilling pride in his actions, a man who believed destroying his wife was a form of self-celebration. The trial captured national attention. Courtrooms filled with reporters, sketches of Cain's expression appearing in newspapers, his once polished image replaced by that of a remorseless killer. Claire's family sat in silence as the details of her final days were revealed, their grief amplified by the cold planning that had led to her death. The jury listened to every detail, and the weight of the evidence proved overwhelming. Cain's double life, his obsessive search history, the remains at the cabin, and Lila's damning words left little doubt. Deliberations lasted less than 3 hours. The verdict was unanimous: guilty of first-degree murder. Cain Wilkens was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The man once admired in his neighborhood would forever be remembered as the husband who killed his wife to replace her with another woman. The community that had once envied the Wilkens' suburban life now carried the shadow of their tragedy, a reminder that appearances can hide the darkest truths. Cain's birthday, which he had intended to mark the beginning of his new life, instead became the date that sealed his downfall.